Good evening. No matter the age, we are subjected to experiences that some are considered entertainment. They have redeeming value, they convey knowledge, and ultimately they educate us. But do we realize the education that we are receiving? Today, I'm going to look back historically and bounce around at some of the things that influenced me to hopefully encourage, educate, and empower youth of today, Generation Z. My subject matter is going to be the Madhouse on McDowell, a televised game show, the game of baseball, and most importantly, a crusty college couch that actually led me on my career path and to this stage today. Hopefully and eventually, I will share with you new ways of learning to educate youth so they have a sporting chance today as well as in the future. So I was raised by baby boomers, and one of the things that I noticed about my parents and their own disguised learning was that they were newspaper readers. They often would not only read the paper, but they'd read the comics. They would look at the crossword puzzles and solve them, even the word searches. It was something that I just always took note of as a youngster. Moving on, our family was a big game-playing family, card games, board games, bingo, you name it. Now, if there's one thing that I could not disguise, it was that my stimulation in these games waned. And about halfway through the games, I was up and out of there. I was done. I needed more stimulation. Now, this was especially true during Monopoly, when I would pass go, hit income tax, and have to give back my $200. I was done. Now, moving along, but there was definitely one thing that had me stimulated better than anything else at that time, single digits. I loved going to Phoenix Suns basketball games at Veterans Memorial Coliseum, the Madhouse on McDowell. It always captivated me, and my dad would take me, and even today I can recall the path we would take, the driving path we would take, exactly where we parked. In fact, if I go back, I'll park in that same parking lot, and they'll walk into the stadium, up the ramps, and into the Coliseum. And it had my attention. The basketball, the 10 guys on the court definitely had my attention. I was a basketball junkie. I loved it. And in fact, so much though, I used to play at the JCC all the time. In fact, this is back in the days when the Suns would actually practice at the JCC as well. And we'd actually intermingle, something you would not ever see again today. Going back to the Coliseum, what I really, recanting, I realized that I really enjoyed, again, the basketball was happening on the court, but I was taking notes and making myself aware of all the other things that was going on around the game, the human touch that I don't think a lot of people identified with. I knew where the PA announcer sat when I was probably 8. And I figured out where probably the people operating the scoreboard to make sure that me as a fan knew what was going on in the game. I knew where they sat and what they were doing. But if there was one thing that really captivated me more than anything, it was near the end of the second quarter when I knew that the halftime promotion was coming up. And the halftime promotion consisted of someone taking a half-court shot for a famed Buick Regal. This was the biggest deal to me. How was it big deal? I would look and scan the bowl looking for that one contestant who got the opportunity. Usually I'm looking for two people. I'm looking for the Sun staffer that's kind of moseying around and finding that contestant, and the two of them would walk down, I can already see it right now, and they'd be in position once halftime hit, and he'd come out and take the shot. It didn't matter if he even came close. For some reason, it was like a game within a game for me to see that happen. Why? It took me many years to kind of look back and recant, like, why was that so interesting to me? For me to kind of unsolve the game operations that were happening in front of me. Well, in depth, I figured out that I'm very intuitive, I'm creative, curious, no doubt, which definitely lines me up to be, I'm a right-brainer. I figured out I'm a right-brainer, that's what I am. In more uncovering of that, I also discovered that I was a pretty average student. I wasn't high excelling, I was average. And why was I average? Well, there's a prevailing thought that curriculum and education is designed by left-brainers for left-brainers. And I was kind of left out, the curious guy. Now, left-brainers, more black and white, more factual, calculated, that sort of thing. So I think I might have been missing that. I'm going to get back to that point in just a little bit, but I want to set that up. Now, a couple years later, my own mother is a contestant on the Wheel of Fortune. So We all got to go to Los Angeles and see the taping. Actually, we actually got to see several tapings before her episode was actually shot. And what was great was she won 2 puzzles. Now, this is back in the day. I'm probably going to speak over the head of some people. When you went shopping after each puzzle and you spent the money that you made on that puzzle. Pat, for $2.15, I'll have the porcelain pig. She didn't buy the porcelain pig. But that's what you would do. You would shop, and then you move on to the next puzzle. Well, by solving those first 2 puzzles, she qualified for the grand prize puzzle at the end. And who would have thunk this would happen? She qualifies for that, and now she's going to be playing for a car. But not just any car. She's going to play for a Buick Regal again. Is this serendipity? I'm not even sure what's going on here. But now my mom's own disguised learning tactics are about to be unveiled in front of a live studio audience and certainly millions of people at home. Now, let's just say the tape that we have of this got stuck in the VCR, just between you and I. All right, so here's what happened. She gets this puzzle. It's person. Sorry, don't have that. And she had 15 seconds to do it. And it was very nerve-wracking because it didn't seem like she was going to get it. Well, she did. She got Eager Beaver. Did anybody else get that? Anyone? Silence. What came of that, for me, personally, looking back, was that I can remember to this day what that looked like. The whole, the studio itself and the operations, it's almost kind of like this. There was a live studio audience, and they were watching a game show, and there were a lot of production elements that, looking back, I really enjoyed that. I never really relate it to anything having to do with a career. A couple years later, or even about that same time, I was also the kind of the student government guy that did activities like pep rallies and what else? Homecoming, things like that, and just assemblies. And even doing those, I realized not so many years later that had career potential or could have tied to my career. But it didn't really dawn on me until I was on this couch during the 51st month of my 54-month-long college career down at U of A, that I finally sat down and said, what are you going to do? Because I really hadn't really come up with anything yet. I knew a lot of things that I liked, and the conversation on the couch was amazing. I can, again, remember that very well today, too, that it went from, what are you going to do? And you better do something you like. So I really focused on like, and I realized, holy cow, I like sports. I've always realized the human touch behind the games, going back to my son's days. And further, I knew I wanted to have pride, and I really wanted to enjoy it. So I literally, within a week or so, went down, and sure enough, the Colorado Rockies, I mean, it was just, again, serendipity, if you will, were just starting their first ever season, their first spring training in Tucson at High Corbett Field in 1993. So I went down there, and I knocked on the door, said, how can I help? And soon I was the answer the phone, sell the ticket, build a batting cage guy, all in a month's time, very quick. It was like a carnival, and it kind of popped out of there, and it was done. It was a blast. I had a great time with it. Soon, I went from graduating in May, and I moved my way up to Denver, actually. And I caught on with the Rockies again in 1994 for their second full season. And I enjoyed it a lot. I was in ticket operations, and I made a lot of lifelong friends and some great acquaintances. But what actually kind of started pulling at me was, it was only really doing my left brain side, if you will. Tickets are pretty black and white. You sell them, you cut them, you send them, you do it all over again. I wanted more. Now, I was never the mascot for the Rockies, but I wanted more of that sort of thing, and I got to do that like twice. Got beat up by some 10-year-olds. Anyhow, it was a lot of fun, but now I had my eye on coming back home. I'm a native, and so literally what the college couch sent me to Denver, it was now kind of sending me back home, and my eye was on the prize of being with the Arizona Diamondbacks, who got awarded the franchise in 1995 to play in 98. I returned in 96, and I got hired by the Diamondbacks in 1997 for game operations, but I had zero experience. I literally had no experience. I don't know how. I mean, thinking back, I'm like, did they actually hire me because I went to Suns games and I kind of conveyed that? Or was it because I went and saw my mom win a Buick on Wheel of Fortune? Is that another reason why maybe they hired me? Or maybe it was because I actually put together an American Bandstand-themed assembly at high school. It's possible those things might have gotten me qualified for the job, But in the most important interview, I did not use any relation to the fact that my mom had won a Buick Regal on Wheel of Fortune in front of a live studio audience and millions at home. Did not use that. I definitely did not tell them that I played Dick Clark in a high school assembly. That probably wouldn't have flown at all. But what I do recall telling them about my experience going to Suns games as a kid and how much I enjoyed that. And so began a career that lasted about 8 seasons long with the Arizona Diamondbacks. I produced close to 700 baseball games with a great staff. I got to build an entire department from nothing. And we had some great feats, defeats, lots of different things happen there. I got to build, speaking of mascots, I got to build Baxter the Bobcat after one of our players' sons said, "It should be a Bobcat," because we used to play at Bank One Ballpark, the Bob, in case you didn't know that. We also, one time we had a fan come to her first game. She didn't get to shoot a half-court shot, but she did go home with $1 million. So there were some great experiences and definitely some defeats. We lost 111 out of 162 games one year. That wasn't fun. But most importantly, in 2001, we did win the World Series. I do have a ring, and I wear it a lot. And it was an awesome time, a great experience. 3 very important things came from that experience for me. 1, intuition. So I could be talking to friends or business acquaintances, whoever it might be, and undoubtedly I can introduce, "Oh, Jeff works for the Diamondbacks. Oh, what do you do?" And I would try to explain to them I do the game operations. As a fan, you get to experience what my staff gets, all the production and the scoreboard and the lights and the sounds. And quickly I could kind of figure out, and I talk to somebody, I can see in their eyes that they've never given a thought to the human touch that happens behind a Diamondbacks game, or any sporting event for that matter. So my intuition was definitely high. It's possible I was actually disseminating a right-brain person from a left-brain person. Maybe. The other great lesson that I got was the ability to be creative. Now, how was I successful in a job that I never really had before? I've given that lots of thought, but it's actually pretty simple yet very important. You saw Jerry Colangelo, who I appeared with in my ring. Jerry, it's worth noting that in 1968, 50 years ago, probably hate hearing that, he came to Phoenix from Chicago to run the Phoenix Suns. He was the general manager, and he ran the club for the next 20 years, from the top position, if you will, assembled a group that bought the team in about '88, and just a few years later got approval for the Diamondbacks. Well, what happened was a lot of the staff from the Suns that he'd cultured and nurtured came over to the Diamondbacks, and I got to work with them. And I really emphasize with. I didn't really work for them. Yeah, probably on an org chart it looked that way. But what it really felt like was we got to work together, we got to collaborate. And the culture was not one of looking over your shoulder or breathing down your back. Rather, it was encouraging, it was an open-door policy, but more than it was empowering. They hired me to do a job, and they expected me to do it, even if I didn't have the experience. And so, yeah, there were some bumps in the road, but overall it was a very good experience. I think it's very important to note that I think Jerry is left-brained and right-brained. There's no doubt. The X factor. So the third lesson was that I now had the know-how and the confidence to do something, well, really, that maybe I haven't done before. And so that X factor started to pull me a little bit away. And actually, after the '05 season and 8 seasons, almost 700 baseball games, I decided to leave. With that, I started an agency. And when I started the agency, a little marketing agency that's still running today, there was a cognition, obviously, that I had to start thinking about who was I? When I was with the Diamondbacks, I was a marketer, a publicist, and an event producer. But now I had to figure out, well, what direction is that going to go? But even before I could even figure that out, I had to figure out, I had baseball blinders on for almost 12 years. Everything I did was about baseball. And so I kind of had to take those blinders off and figure out a new way of doing things that didn't have to come back to baseball. Hard to explain, but if you've ever been in a career for a very long time, and it's only one industry, you've got to kind of shed yourself, like change your skin almost. So once my metamorphosis was pretty complete, I realized that I was a lot of things. I was like kind of a Leatherman, a multi-tool, a Swiss Army knife almost. Sometimes I say Swiss agency knife, because now I had all these different skill sets just from producing baseball games that really translated very well to different clientele that my agency got to deal with. So that was pretty exciting to figure that out. And then a cognition ignition happened. I'm going to try to copyright this, so don't take that one. The cognition ignition just happened actually very recently. A client came to me with a way to teach children and a new way to learn, and that's kind of where disguised learning comes from. Imagine if you could actually marry STEM, we talked about that tonight, science, technology, engineering, and math, with sports. That's right up my alley. If I had something like that back when I was a student, I probably would have done a little bit better. The great news is that this client that brought this to me about a year ago is actually a very close friend. And the good work that he began is actually now my own, and it's called STEM Sports. Very simple. STEM Sports, like I said, it marries STEM in the classroom, starting at the 3rd grade level, and the catalyst to the STEM education is a sport. There is science behind sports, which is very important. And the kids actually get to go play some basketball maybe, but then they come back into the classroom and figure out their field goal percentage and how well they did on the court. And maybe they're not even thinking that they're learning. So it's all very exciting. It's very cognitive, offers that physical activity, and that double play is something that I think is, quite honestly, a slam dunk. The great news is, as I told you before, I had my baseball hat on for 12 years. Now I get to put it back on because we're going to come out with STEM baseball and STEM softball. And the greatest news of all of this is that it's going to be designed by right-brained people for right-brained kids, and I'm pretty certain the lefties will get it too. Thank you.